Happy Sunday, yogis. I'm so excited to be live with you all here again. I'm really grateful for all of the comments from last week, all of the encouragements that I received in private messages and text messages and phone calls. So thank you all so much. Hey, Steph. Thank you all so much for your feedback and for your kind words. I love you too. So yes, continue leaving comments, continue asking me questions and reaching out, because my whole purpose in doing this is that I want these teachings, hi Kathy, I want these teachings to be accessible, hey Jen, so that we can continue a dialogue about the practical application of yoga. Talking about philosophy doesn't change our lives. What changes our lives? Hey Chels! Hey Peter, what changes our lives is not talking about philosophy. What changes our lives is experiencing the implementation of these tools. Yay, hi Amanda, hey Hannah. So that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to dialogue about our real life experiences and the ways that our choices impact our experiences, and that we have this power that yoga gives us to make choices. We talked last week that, Sutra 1.2, the second sutra in chapter 1, tells us what yoga is. Yoga is the ability to harness the fluctuations of your mind. That's what yoga is. So if we have the ability to harness the fluctuations of our mind, then we're no longer the victims of our mind. Now we're the heroes of our life, because we get to decide where to focus our attention. That's another way to define this practice, is yoga is the ability to choose, focus, and sustain your attention on one thing at a time. So when we make a choice, we choose to focus on our breath, we sustain that focus over time, and then we observe the results. And just like a scientist, right, that's experimenting or exploring, then we evaluate the impact of that choice on our life, and based on the impact, we can decide, would I like to continue going down that path? Does that path bring me more sustainable joy? Or would I like to make a new choice? And we go from there. So thank you all so much for joining me live, because as we talk about this in real time, we can actually have a conversation about it, and that makes me really happy. So thank you all. As you hop on, for those of you who haven't already said hello, please say hello. And I would just love to get a little bit of a survey here to answer if you're signing on as a yoga teacher. Are you a teacher in training? Are you a yogi? Or are you new to this teaching? So just leave a comment as you hop in, say hello, and let me know and let the rest of the group know. Are you a teacher? Are you a yogi student? Are you a teacher in training? Or are you just exploring this practice and you're not really sure? So that would be awesome to see. All right, last week we talked about what yoga is and the difference between Purusha, hey Liz, and Prakriti. So Purusha is our unchanging self. It's our consciousness, it's our spirit, it's our soul. It's the part of us that is unaffected by the external world. Thanks, Peter. Cool. Yay, new instructor. Yay! That's the difference between Purusha and Prakriti. And we identified that our mind is in fact Prakriti, meaning that our mind is of this world. Our mind is changing. Our mind is not conscious in the sense of the light of Purusha's consciousness. So it's when we begin to identify who we are with our mind, then we can suffer. From last week, I had a lot of comments and questions about anxiety. I shared that this is something I've struggled with for years and years, ever since I was an adolescent or maybe even younger. And I wanted to say something about mental health. First of all, I deeply respect the complexity of mental health. I understand the power of our mind, our brain, our physiology, hormones, our chemistry, and in no means do I intend to undermine the power of our nervous system, the power of our chemistry to impact our experience. However, I choose to focus my attention on the solution. So rather than talk about mental illness, I'm a proponent of mental health because I want to focus on the part that I do have control over. Yes, there's aspects of my life, of my experiences, of my biochemistry and physiology that I do not have control over. What I do have control over is how I respond, and that's where yoga comes in. So I had a lot of questions from students from last week of how do you respond to anxiety? What do you do to make it go away? And this is what I have to say about that. With a ton of compassion and understanding, I say that what has worked for me, and there's no one size fits all, there's no magic fix, right? For me, what's helped my anxiety is that I've accepted that I live with a mood disorder. And when that shows up for me, whether it's on the pendulum of anxiety or on the pendulum of depression, when it shows up, I embrace it. I recognize that I'm experiencing anxiety. I recognize what that means. What does it mean to feel anxious? My heart rate, my breath, my muscle tension, and I become the observer of my experience. So instead of being overwhelmed by the flow of anxiety, I can take a step back. I can witness my experience. I can acknowledge the discomfort. I can even acknowledge that I want it to go away. However, when I cross over from the place of wanting it to go away to acknowledging that it's temporary, all of a sudden for me, I feel space between me and my anxiety. My anxiety is uncomfortable. I don't like my heart to race. I don't enjoy the muscle tension. I don't enjoy the racing thoughts, the fear, etc. But I know it's temporary. I've felt this before, and it's past. So I identify what I'm feeling. I'm feeling anxious, and it's temporary. So I create some space between my anxiety, and instead of gripping and wishing for it to go away, I embrace that that's where I'm at in that moment. And then I choose to focus and sustain my attention on something else. What do I have control over in this moment? I have control over how I'm breathing. So I can start there. I can begin to focus on the movement of my belly as I breathe. And I can bring my focused attention away from the anxiety, away from the discomfort in my physical body. Hi, Natalie, welcome. And I can tune instead to something that brings me more relaxation, more peace, like my breath. Does that mean that my anxiety instantly goes away? No. Does that mean that I no longer have anxiety that overwhelms me? No. In fact, this morning, I woke up really anxious about getting on Facebook Live and talking to you guys about sutras because this is me putting myself out there. And that is very vulnerable. So I can focus on the anxiety of what will people think or say, or will people criticize my opinion? Will I say something today that I change my mind about later on? Perhaps. Did I choose to focus my attention on that? No. I got to focus on my imagination of the people that would log on today and learn something new, the people that would feel empowered, the students that would start to implement these tools in a new way. And by choosing to focus my attention on that, I could sit in my anxiety and allow those two things to coexist. One of the sutras in chapter 2 actually explains that one of the impacts of your yoga practice is the ability to sit comfortably in duality. so that I can sit comfortably with opposing ideas. I can sit comfortably with opposing emotions, right? And so that's what my yoga practice has provided me with my anxiety. So I hope that opens your eyes to a new way to look at your experience of anxiety and to recognize that, hey, this is human. This is part of the human experience, and you're not alone in whatever version, whatever degree of anxiety that you experience. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And I'm an open book, so please share your thoughts and feelings with me about that. If you have questions or concerns and you want to talk privately, I would love to do that. So the next sutra is after Sutra 1.2 that defines what yoga is as the ability to focus our mind on one thing, the ability to harness the fluctuations of our mind. The next sutra tells us that when we do this, as a result of being able to focus your attention on one thing at a time, to harness the fluctuations of your mind, the result is that you, the yogi, become more connected to your true nature. So our Purusha, this light of consciousness, this truer self, can begin to shine the light of consciousness, of confidence, wisdom, and joy onto our mind, even though our mind is Prakriti, and that consciousness can start to clear away some of the debris that causes suffering in the first place. The next sutra tells us that we become more like the object of our focus. So, basically, we have a magic magnifying mind. Just like a magnifying glass or a spotlight, what we choose to focus our attention on is what expands. So think about that. What is your mode of operation? Hey, Jess. What do you easily set your focus on? Is it your anxiety and your fear? Is it what could go wrong? Is it the abundance of life? Is it the ease and comfort in your body? And whatever it is that you choose to focus your attention on, that's what you will become more like. This is a beautiful, beautiful truth about reality, because what that does is it puts the power in my hands. Now, as the chooser, the one who chooses what to focus on, I'm empowered to impact my experience from what I choose. Do I want more confidence? Then I can focus on that. Do I want to radiate warmth? Then I can focus on the sun. I can meditate on the sun and become more like the qualities of the sun. So our minds are interesting things. I don't know about yours, but I know about mine. And what I know about mine is that my mind wants to focus on something all the time. All the time. So my mind will be focused on something, and it'll either choose it unconsciously or I can choose it consciously. When I allow my mind to work unconsciously, then the things that I choose to focus on tend to increase my suffering or cause more discomfort, more distance in my relationships, more unease in my body. And when I choose to focus on something purposefully, I intentionally choose to focus on my breath in an asana practice, or I choose to focus on the amazing qualities of my partner, or I choose to focus on everything that Thea does that brings me pride, then those things expand and I become more like those things. That's where my power lies. So does this mean that we never think awful thoughts or that our mind doesn't wander to deep, dark places? Not at all. What it means, though, is that we start to recognize our power. And the moment that it dawns on us that we're suffering, we can identify that we have chosen to focus on something that's bringing us suffering, and then we can make another choice. So let me know in the comments if that resonates with you, if you've had experience with that. I know that I have for sure. That's the power of our yoga practice, right? So one of my favorite definitions I learned from my teacher of what yoga is that yoga is more sustained joy for me. Yoga is more sustained joy for me. Who doesn't want that? That's what we all think life's about. Whatever it is that you choose to do with your life, it's because you believe it will bring you more sustainable joy. So think about it. What you choose for a profession, whether or not you choose to go to school, continued education, graduate school, etc. Whatever choice you make, whatever you do with your time, you believe on some level that it is that will bring you more sustainable joy. If you're pursuing money, you believe that money will bring you more sustainable joy. If you're pursuing a status, social status, if you're pursuing a relationship, if you're pursuing physical fitness, if you're pursuing knowledge, whatever it is that you're pursuing, you believe on some level it will bring you more sustainable joy. And sometimes we make a choice that we think will bring us more sustainable joy, and it doesn't happen. That's Sam Yoga. When we confuse two similar things, like we think that food, that indulging in comfort food will bring us more sustainable joy, but in fact, it brings disease or discomfort in the body. That's Sam Yoga. We're confusing comfort with joy. Because what is joy? Joy is different than happiness. Joy is different than pleasure. And it's sustained joy. Because I can get instant gratification in a lot of different ways, especially in our time. I can eat a Snickers bar, and that's going to bring me like some serious pleasure and some happiness right in that moment. Is that sustained joy? No, it's not sustained joy. So when we're talking about more sustained joy for me, we're talking about a deep-rooted contentment that is a sincere pursuit of lasting health and wellness as a whole being. So it requires a lot of discernment. Viveka is the Sanskrit word for discernment. As a yogi, in order to make choices that bring more sustained joy, we need to have discernment to be able to identify, is eating a Snickers bar going to bring me more joy? And I need to have clarity of mind to identify whether or not that's joy or that's instant gratification. So there's a couple of ways that we can use our tools to identify if we have clear perception in the moment, right? Is it clear perception that eating this Snickers bar is going to bring me joy? Well, first, I can use direct experience. So I can eat the Snickers bar, and then see how it goes. How do I feel as I'm eating the Snickers bar? How do I feel a minute after eating the Snickers bar? How do I feel 10 minutes, an hour, right? And then I get to evaluate that choice based on direct experience. I can also make inferences, right? Like I could see someone eat a Snickers bar and smile, and I can infer that eating Snickers bars must bring joy because that person is smiling and eating a Snickers bar. Or I can ask a reliable source. So someone that I trust that has like crazy experience eating Snickers bar, I can be like, okay, so tell me, does eating Snickers bars bring you more sustained joy? And then that person can tell me yes or no. And because they're a reliable source, I can go from there. So that's how, hey, Valerie, that's how we can identify whether or not we have clear perception about a decision, about reality, really. So we use direct experience, inference, and reliable source. So when I'm sharing this wisdom teaching with you, I've used my direct experience, I've made inferences, and I have some amazing, reliable sources, my teacher and her teacher. And that's where I sit today. That's my understanding of clear perception today. That may change in time, but today, this is what I believe is clarity. You, as you receive this information from me, you can consider me a reliable source or not. You can make inferences. You can look at my life. If you know me, if you know my relationship with my daughter or my partner or my practice, and you can make inferences about whether or not this is clear perception, and then you can have direct experience. Try on, hi Robin, try on some of these things that we talk about, some of these tools, and experiment, explore. See how it impacts you to try on these tools, and then you can decide if it's clear perception or it's distorted perception. Sam yoga is a tricky thing, confusing two similar things, Sam yoga. We confuse a lot of things culturally, right? We confuse selfishness and self-care. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but we confuse taking care of ourselves with being selfish. We confuse loneliness and hunger. We feel lonely, but we eat. We're confusing loneliness and hunger. We confuse codependency with love or compassion. Instead of doing for others what they can do for themselves, which is codependency, we think that that's love, right? So this Sam yoga is a very tricky thing. Discernment, cultivating discernment takes time and practice. So use those 3 tools of evaluating clear perception, direct experience, inference, and reliable source, and let me know how that goes. All right, so continuing on, again, please, as you're listening, if you have questions or comments, feedback, clarification, please let me know. So, continuing on. More sustainable joy for me. Hey, Mike, welcome. More sustainable joy for me. The opposite of that is suffering. So the other end of the spectrum is suffering. It's pretty easy for me to identify when I'm suffering. And once I've identified that, it's good news. Because once I've identified that I'm suffering, then I can do something about it. And I mentioned briefly last week the kleshas, which are the clouds of the mind. And there's 5 kleshas that exist in our mind and essentially block our clear perception. So if I have the light of Purusha over here, which is confidence, wisdom, and joy, consciousness, unchanging, it's my truest, highest self. Purusha experiences reality through the lens of my mind. So my Purusha, my true self, can only experience reality through the filter of my mind. If my mind is clouded from misperception, if my mind is clouded by any of these other kleshas, then I don't have clear sight to perceive reality. And one of the underlying assumptions in yoga is that suffering is caused by some misperception of reality. Interestingly, though, I'd like to point out that yoga also asserts Prakti Paksha Bhavana, which is another way of looking at it. So your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth. And they can coexist. So we're not talking about like a capital T truth. We're talking about lowercase t truth. What's true for you, what's true for me. Neither one is more right or more wrong. However, if we're experiencing suffering, then yoga says that there is some kleshas present. We can have the kleshas present, most of us have the kleshas present on a regular basis, and not be experiencing suffering. Or we could be suffering and we know that the kleshas are present. So if you're suffering, the kleshas are present. However, just because the kleshas are present doesn't necessarily mean you're suffering. Let me know if you need some clarification. So let's get into what the kleshas are. The kleshas start with misperception. We've talked about that several times already. It's avidya, lack of clarity, lack of sight. We are programmed as human beings to be reactive, to keep ourselves safe. Our nervous system is designed to jumpstart, to override higher order functioning to keep us safe. Example, a bear is coming after you. What do? Run. Well, I'm not sure what you're really supposed to do, but most likely you will run, you will fight, or you'll freeze. So we have these programmed responses to keep ourselves safe. Do we have a time to evaluate? Let me pause and think. Is this bear dangerous? Does this bear appear to be aggressive? Am I stronger than this bear? Can I take on this bear? Hey, Victoria. We don't have time to process through our higher order functioning. Instead, all we have time for is reaction. Get out of there. Get yourself safe. Stay alive. That's what our survival mechanisms are for, to keep us safe. However, we live in a society where it's very rare for you to come across a bear or a mountain lion or to be in imminent danger of your physical body. Unfortunately, we live in chronic stress. Most of us live in chronic stress where that system of survival is activated more often than not. And that causes all of these symptoms of anxiety, hypertension, tense muscles, increased heart rate, short and shallow respiration. So because we're operating from that survival place when it's not the appropriate response, we suffer. So when we hear our partner say something in a certain tone and we immediately react to it in fight mode, and that survival mechanism kicks on, and instead of evaluating the situation, we react, then we're misplacing that tool of survival. So instead, in the way that we live on a daily basis, we can pause, take time to evaluate, tap into our higher order functioning, make critical decisions, ask ourselves questions, ask reliable sources, and then proceed. We have time to pause, whether it's for just a breath or whether it's to even step away from a situation to gather yourself and come back to the situation. So misperception, avidya, impulsive reaction, that has a place. If you're about to step in front of a car and your body just automatically jumps back and saves your life, it has a place. However, it's often misplaced and overused, and unfortunately has negative effects on our relationship, on our health even. So misperception is the underlying root klesha. All of the other kleshas grow from misperception. So if you're suffering, there's something that you're misperceiving. And I have some tools, some meditations that I can share with you if you would like some tangible, specific guidelines of how, when you identify you're experiencing avidya, misperception, how do you address that? How do you gain some clarity? So we could talk about that. The next klesha is asmita. Asmita is ego. Some people translate that as ego. I prefer to define this differently because the word ego is so charged. It's like the word God. In our culture, the word ego is used so much, and it has these different negative or positive connotations. So instead of ego, I'd like to think of asmita as identifying with prakriti, Identifying with the part of you that is always changing. Identifying with anything that's not Purusha. If Purusha is your true self, then Asmita is defining who you are by something outside of yourself. Something that's temporary. Something that's Prakriti, which is always changing. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Asmita would be if you have a sense of self based on your appearance. If you're young and beautiful and you define yourself, you get a lot of self-worth and esteem from being young and beautiful. That is Asmita. You're identifying with something that's not Purusha. It's not your truest self. And that in and of itself, like I said, does not immediately cause suffering. So you can be experiencing Asmita. You can identify with your profession. You can feel esteem from being a well-known member of your community. You can gain esteem from how much money you make or what car you drive, or how intelligent you are. Whatever qualities that you have that are Prakriti qualities, that are changing qualities, if you identify with those things, right now, that may or may not bring you suffering. However, what we know about Prakriti, what we know about Prakriti is that it's always changing. So if Prakriti is always changing and your identity is tied to something that is temporary, then you're at risk, you're vulnerable. Hey, Carrie, you're vulnerable to experiencing suffering because at any moment, that thing that you're identifying with can change. And then, who are you? After Asmita, we have Raga, which is clinging or craving or lusting, longing for something that once brought you pleasure and hoping to experience that thing again. This I call, lovingly, those who have been in my workshops before, I call this the Raisinette Klesha. The Raisinette Klesha because I have a love affair with Raisinets. And because I've had so many experiences eating Raisinets and experiencing pleasure, I want to repeat that. So I crave Raisinets. I long for Raisinets and I cling to my Raisinets. In fact, that's the past. So let me redirect my language there. In the past, I would long for and crave and cling to Raisinets. So the misperception, the Sam Yoga, confusing two similar things. I was confusing pleasure for sustainable joy. I was confusing the pleasure that I get from eating Raisinets with bringing myself sustainable joy. And because of that misperception, that avidya, thinking Raisinets are going to make me happy, that's what I need right now. I need Raisinets. That'll solve all my problems. So that misperception led me to indulging in Raisinets. This is also where addiction comes in. This is the addiction klesha. So the compulsion to drink or use drugs or whatever, gamble, the compulsion to overeat is because of an underlying misperception that thing, that behavior will bring me joy. So I need to do this because I want to feel better. So I'm going to do this thing because that's going to make me feel better. Unfortunately, because it's misperception, it doesn't work. But we're programmed to think it's going to because it gives us that little glimpse of pleasure that we confuse for sustainable joy. And in confusing that, we continue to perpetuate that behavior. The following klesha goes hand in hand. With raga, the next klesha is dvesha. Dvesha is avoidance. We want to avoid loneliness or confrontation or discomfort or pain. How many of us want to avoid pain so badly that we end up creating more? I call this the dentist klesha. My mother has always trained me that going to the dentist on a regular basis, maintenance, will prevent future suffering. She told me that. She told me that 100 times. But as an adult taking care of my own teeth, I would prefer to avoid the pain, the physical pain, the bill, the annoyance of making a dentist appointment, And so if you push it off, then what happens when you avoid the dentist? More pain and suffering later on. So it's a misperception. It's avidya, right? I'm misperceiving the reality of this decision, that if I avoid it, it will somehow go away. If I avoid it, then I will successfully divert pain and suffering. I'll be able to protect myself from the pain and suffering. But the reality is, because I'm misperceiving the situation, I end up experiencing more pain or suffering, or both, because of my refusal to confront whatever this thing is that I'm avoiding, because I think it's going to bring me pain and suffering. So raga and dvesha, I see them working together in my life all the time. Because whatever it is I'm clinging to it because I'm avoiding something else, right? Following dvesha is abhinavesha. Thanks, Jessica. Following dvesha is abhinavesha. Abhinavesha is fear. It's fear of change. It's fear of death. Fear of ending, right? So we're afraid to quit our job because we're afraid of change. We're afraid to make a new choice in our lifestyle. Hey, Kim. Because we're afraid of change, or we're afraid of our mode of operation, the way we've been living ending. So these kleshas almost always coexist. They grow from the soil of avidya, of misperception, and they work together to cloud our ability to see reality clearly. And they create an obstacle to making a choice that does bring more sustainable joy. So we make a choice based on what we think is going to bring more sustainable joy. Then we end up suffering and we don't understand why. It's because of misperception. So a really beautiful way, I believe, to depict this relationship between the kleshas and how they all work together is to think of a relationship, a romantic relationship. The underlying misperception in a relationship is often that this person will make me happy, that this relationship will make me happy. Being in this relationship is better than being without a relationship. Those are some of the underlying kleshas. And when we're experiencing suffering in a relationship, then we know that these kleshas are present, okay? So the first misperception is, this relationship makes me happy, will bring me more sustainable joy. It's always the underlying belief, whether we're conscious of it or not. It's there. So beyond this misperception, asmita, or identifying with something that's not purusha, we begin to define ourselves through the lens of this relationship. I am so-and-so's girlfriend, wife, fiance, partner, etc., right? That's part of who I am, and whatever else that brings with it, if this person is highly attractive or educated or makes a lot of money, whatever egocentric qualities that they have going on, then your sense of self, if you're identifying with prakriti, if you're identifying who you are with things that are beyond purusha, then you're also taking on feeling valuable because this person is attractive, or other people look at us and think a certain thing. So we're identifying our worth, our value, who we are with this relationship and everything that it brings. In addition, at some point, most likely, this relationship brought joy or brought pleasure. So raga, clinging or craving, we cling to the notions of the early stages of the relationship. We cling to who we thought this person was. We cling to the memories of positivity and laughter and feeling good about ourselves. So we cling to these memories and we crave more of them. We want more. We want more romantic dates, or we want more affirmation from a partner that loves us. We want more intimacy. We want more feelings of connection and belonging. So because we crave those things and we believe that this person is going to bring it because we're stuck in avidya and asmita, then now we've gotten to raga and we've got our nails in it, man. We're clinging to this thing that we think is supposed to make us feel better. After that, what are we avoiding? Devesha. Avoiding loneliness. Avoiding the conversations with everyone in your life if you have to tell them that now you're single or things didn't work out with you and your partner. Avoiding the disappointment or the letdown that this relationship wasn't what you thought it might be. Avoiding the conversation, the actual confrontation with this person that you're in partnership with. So whatever it is that you're clinging to, likely you're avoiding the counterpart to that thing. So if you're clinging to belonging, then you're avoiding solitude or loneliness. And finally, abhinavesha, the fear of change, the fear of death, the fear of ending. We're afraid of these relationships dying. We're afraid of the change. We're afraid to let something that existed end. And so because ultimately we're afraid, we'd rather stay in our avidya. We'd rather stay in the misperception that this relationship is going to bring me joy. So I'm just going to cling to it harder. I'm going to work harder on this relationship, and then magically it's going to bring me more sustainable joy. Not the case. Not the case. So am I saying that, as soon as a relationship brings suffering, then you need to end the relationship? Because if you're not ending the relationship, it's because you're scared. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that yoga gives you the opportunity to ask yourself the hard questions. To ask yourself, to be willing to see the truth about you. To check in with, what do I believe about this relationship? What do I really believe about it? And from there, is there another way to look at it? Is there another way that I can see this relationship? Is this relationship truly bringing me more sustainable joy? Or is it causing suffering? And again, you can go back to your 3 tools of clear perception. Use your direct experience. How is this relationship impacting your life in a real way? Not in your mind, not in how you thought it should, but how is it actually affecting you? Make inferences about your lifestyle. Notice your own habits when you're in this relationship. Are you taking better care of yourself? Are you more present in your relationships? Are you more present at work? Are you more alive and vital? And reliable sources. If you have 1 or 2 safe and trusted friends, or a mentor, better yet, to check in with about your misperception, brilliant, such a treasure. We don't need a whole world to reveal ourselves to, but 1 or 2 close, trusted, safe friends, confidants that we can use as a reliable source to give us a new lens to look in on our situation. That, to me, that's the value of my teacher. My teacher doesn't live my life. So she's not stuck in my misperceptions. She has her own misperceptions, I'm sure, but she's not stuck in my misperceptions. So if I'm experiencing suffering and I'm looking at my situation from a certain perspective, the only perspective I have, then when I reach out to my teacher, she can look at it with new eyes. If I have spinach in my teeth, sure, maybe I will eventually get to a mirror and I will recognize that I have spinach in my teeth and I can take the spinach out of my teeth myself. But it might take me quite a while to figure out that the spinach is there. My teacher, all it takes is one look at me and she can identify, oh, hey, Kels, you've got some spinach in your teeth. Let's get that out. So that outside perspective is absolutely vital in my yoga practice. And I talked about this recently, that the two most important things in our experience of being a yogi, of living this lifestyle, this philosophy, this cosmology, is a personal practice and a teacher, a loving, compassionate teacher. So a teacher, how do you find a teacher? I am not talking about a group asana class. So yes, you have instructors that teach you yoga in a group asana setting. And that's great because you can create connections there, and your teacher, your instructor can get to know you on a certain level. However, there's likely a ton of other people around, and the yoga practice really happens in a heart-to-heart connection where there is intimacy and trust and compassion, and we can talk safely about things that we can't talk about in a group asana class. I can't share about my divorce in a group asana class. It's not the time and place. But in the context of my relationship with my trusting teacher, I can talk about anything and everything, and she can help give me tools. She can help redirect my attention. She can help point out my misperception of vidya, or she can help point out my samskaras, my habits, and help give me tools. And that is paired, the relationship with your loving, compassionate teacher, the one-on-one relationship, is paired with your personal practice. How do you come up with a personal practice? Well, the best way, let your teacher give you a personal practice. Let them prescribe you a personal practice, because this is someone who knows you and loves you and has an outside lens to look in on your situation. Or you can start to establish your own personal practice and use your tools to evaluate that practice as you go. So would you like this practice to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour or 7 minutes? Or would you like this to be inside or outside? Would you like your personal practice to involve physical postures or not? Would you like it to involve breath work or meditation or sound or oils or massage? What would you like your practice to look like? And you can start to experiment and explore. And from there, you can look at how it's impacting you. So for me right now, my personal practice is about 10 minutes long. It's in the morning, in my home, on my yoga mat. It starts with a gentle sequence of poses just to open up through my chest, my shoulders, my neck, to bring space for my breath. And it's followed by a breath practice that is a combination of prescriptions from my teacher and from my own direct experience and what feels good in my body. So that's what I have for me. That's what works for me. And when I meet with my teacher, we get to talk about it and we get to refine, because that's what yoga is. It's contrary action aimed at refinement. Is it my nature to wake up in the morning and do yoga before I start my day? No, that is not my nature. Anyone who knows me knows I love sleep more than just about anything. Probably more than Raisinets. I love sleep. So is it my nature to wake up a little bit earlier to do my practice? No. So it's contrary action. I'm doing something differently than I would have done unconsciously. And it's aimed at refinement. It is pointing me and moving me in the direction of refining my body, refining my breath, refining my mind, refining my spirit. So it's moving me in this direction of more sustained joy. That's what's so beautiful about more sustained joy for me. More means it's always evolving, it's always growing, it's always moving forward. It's not a destination. I don't share these teachings because I've arrived and my mind is clear and I have clear perception. That is not the case. You want to know why I share these? Because I'm crazy. I share these because I need this teaching so badly. My daughter and my partner and my friends can attest to that. That without my yoga practice, left to my own devices, I suffer. I am clouded with misperception. I am riddled with anxiety and darkness. And that's how I know. That's my ding ding, red light, red flag. Get going on your yoga practice. Bust out your tools and do some work. So that's why I share these. I share these because I need them so badly. I've been impacted positively. I have a life I could have never dreamed of. 10 years ago, before I started teaching yoga, I was so self-deprecating and self-loathing that to think that I now sit in a place of compassion for myself, of willingness to share my story on the internet to people I know and people I don't know, my willingness to take a really honest look at myself and to make changes for the better, to share my heart with my teacher and my friends, and to get feedback from the world and from people that love me. That says so much to me about the power of yoga. I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago. It makes me feel emotional because it's so powerful. Seriously. And this does not mean that I don't struggle. I struggle. I struggle a lot. That's why I keep teaching. I keep teaching because it builds prana for me. Teaching yoga fills me up. Talking about these teachings fills me up. I need to hear it. I need to hear this wisdom teaching all the time. And I need to share it to keep it. So I keep sharing it so I can keep it. And I do it from a humble place of absolute overflowing gratitude for what this practice has done for me, how it's shifted my ability to be the hero of my life. I am not the victim of mental illness. I am a proponent of mental health. I believe in serious compassion for ourselves and others, understanding that I alone know my experience. I don't know your experience. And I share these from a place of humility and hoping that something you can pick up from the Yoga Sutras will radically impact your life as well. So I hope that love and that gratitude comes across loud and clear, my friends. If you have questions or comments, please reach out to me. I absolutely love talking about these pieces of wisdom, these nuggets that can transform our life. And I hope to see you all again soon. Next Sunday is Easter. So I will be, hi Angie, I love you. I love you. I need it too. So I will be skipping Sunday Sutras on this coming Sunday for Easter, and I'll jump back in the following Sunday. Stay tuned for details about the June workshop. If you want a community of people to see face-to-face and to talk about how to do these things. So we're talking a lot about what these teachings say, but if you want to know how to do these things, like what can you practically actually do, how can you create a personal practice, then stay tuned for some details of a workshop in June that I will be hosting in person with a maximum of 10 people so we can keep the group really nice and intimate. And if you need help finding a teacher or understanding what that relationship, that one-to-one relationship might look like or feel like, because you would like to explore this in a more tangible way, then reach out to me. I would love to support you. With all of my heart, yogis, much love, and have a beautiful rest of your day.